I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Those up with the head. Intercepted. 30. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And then the cannons come. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast, the midweek show for Week 9. Headed into Week 9 of the NFL season. The Buccaneers back on Monday Night Football, taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. They certainly have a couple of challenges ahead of them before the bye week. But we are right around the midpoint of the NFL season. The Buccaneers, 8 games into this thing, are 4-4. They are 1-3 over their last 4 games, and they find themselves obviously in a precarious situation, losing against Atlanta last week, losing some ground in the NFC South race. But Evan, today we're going to try and take a broad look at the second half of the season for the Bucs, kind of break down the strength and the weaknesses of this roster, and see if they ultimately have what it takes to go on a run here down the stretch, because, you know, the situation the Bucs find themselves in, they're going to have to play like hell out of the bye week especially, maybe go on a run, and really kind of look for a repeat of that 2023 season. They went 5-1 down the stretch, and it was ultimately enough to win the division. It was a weaker NFC South at that time. But right now, the Falcons are 4-0 in the NFC South. They have the sweep and the tiebreaker over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs potentially going to have to play good enough to be a wild card team at the end of the year. We'll take a look at some of the other top teams in the NFC and, really see what it's going to take to get the Buccaneers into the postseason, because, 4-4 doesn't mean your season is cooked. But if the Bucs head into the bye week 4-6, like a lot of people are expecting them to, then it's going to be quite the uphill battle, because there's a lot of good teams in the NFC this year.
There's just not a lot of margin for error, right? And I think they've they put themselves in that position, right? I mean, there's 2 games against Atlanta, especially the first game against Atlanta, should have probably been a W, right? And I think if that's a W, then last week's loss isn't as crucial, I think, right? Because you're not getting swept by Atlanta. You would have split with them, and you'd still be alive for this division right now, especially with, an easier schedule down the stretch. But yeah, now, I mean, look, you're playing the back-to-back defending champs, this week, and then you're playing the team that they just beat in the Super Bowl in the 49ers the following week. So you're playing 2 of the more innovative head coaches in the NFL, I'd say, in terms of offense, right? And we know that this team's downfall or biggest issue, I think, right now has been the defense. So I think that's a cause for concern as well. And look, we're not trying to sit here and basically pencil in 2 losses here before the bye week and say, well, they're going to be 4-6. But I mean, the reality is, like, they're probably not going to win these games. Even if they had beaten Atlanta, twice, I still think these games are a challenge, right? We talked about this, and that's why that Atlanta game was so important, because we've talked about this for a long time, about this stretch, right, of Baltimore, Atlanta, Kansas City, San Francisco, and how important it was to get off to a hot start early in the season, which the Bucs did, right? The Bucs were able to do. They started off the season 3-1, right? But then they have a tough loss in Atlanta, which I think it's going to come back to bite them. And then obviously the injuries happen, and you can't predict that. But it's going to be tough sledding. However, just like you said, they are going to need a repeat performance of what they did in 2023, going 5-1 down the stretch. Things looked dead after that Texans game. I mean, it looked like this team was done. Right. I mean, it really did. I think they were 3-5 at that point after that game. Or I think it was 3-6 maybe. And it just looked like they were completely cooked. Like it was over. And In that case, I think that actually might have been 3-5. In that case, they were able to rally and they were able to take advantage of some not so great opponents, right? They beat the Carolina Panthers twice. They played them after, later in the season, just like they do this year. But then they also, they went into Lambeau and beat the Packers. Like that's a game that not many expected them to win. They dominated the Jaguars on Christmas Eve. Those were the games that really separated them from the pack, I think, and they're going to need that again this year. And it sucks that they're in this position. But it's just the reality of the situation.
I think that when this Bucs team gets rolling again, and they will get rolling again, there are some favorable games on the schedule here down the stretch. The ebbs and flow of the NFL season, we talk about so much, but like teams go through good weeks and bad weeks, right? Good stretches, bad stretches. It happens to every team, even the great NFL teams. Now, we know enough to know the Bucs maybe not the upper crust of great NFL teams, but let's take a look around the NFC. Look at some of the top contenders here down the stretch. Detroit, first place in the NFC as of today, 6-1, the one loss on their schedule. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 2. Second place in the NFC, the Washington Commanders, 6-2. One of those 2 losses on their schedule. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 1. So we certainly know what this team is capable of. When everything is working, when player execution is where it's supposed to be, when the level of communication on the defensive side of the ball is where it's supposed to be, when the quarterback can take care of the football, we know where the offense can be. They're top 5 in a lot of the NFL offensive categories right now. If they're not top 5, they're top 10. So we know where this team can be, but where they are right now is 4-4, and there's just a lot of things that are not going right for them. A lot of things that need to be fixed, and we'll talk about that. But Green Bay, third in the NFC right now, 6-2 record. Minnesota at a 5-2 record. Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago. Those are all the teams ahead of Tampa Bay in the NFC. So, Evan, we look at this list of teams here, and I want to ask you, the Bucs are now relying on a lot of these teams to start losing some games. Obviously, Atlanta, but Chicago, Philly, Minnesota, Green Bay, Washington, Detroit. Are there any one of these teams that you think can stay in one piece for the rest of the season? Because one of these 8 teams, I think, is going to fall apart before the end of the year, and that's going to be beneficial to Tampa Bay. But is it going to be 2 or 3 or 4 like the Bucs would probably need to get a favorable seed here?
It's going to be difficult. The one thing that points out to me the most is the teams you mentioned, right? The teams that are ahead of Tampa Bay. The Bucs don't play any of them left, right? They've already played Washington. They've already played Detroit. They've already played Atlanta. They've already played Philly. So they don't play any of the teams that are in front of them anymore, okay? So, yeah, like you can't really help yourself out as much, right? You're going to need some help from the outside, basically. The interesting thing, though, and I will say, potentially, I mean, look, teams like the Bears right now, right? They're in front of Tampa Bay. They're not in a playoff spot right now. That's a team that maybe the Bucs could jump. Minnesota, maybe, but I still think they're a pretty decent team. I know they suffered 2 losses here, but I do think they're a pretty decent team. Arizona, obviously, being in the 4 spot. Look, San Francisco right now is right behind Tampa Bay tiebreaker-wise because Arizona beat San Francisco, so Arizona has the tiebreaker. That's why they're in first place. I expect San Francisco to jump Tampa Bay. I don't expect San Francisco to be behind Tampa. So I think Arizona could be a team that the Bucs could theoretically jump. But yeah, that's 2. Right. And that would put you in the 7 seed. But again, you'd need some help, right? You would need some help there. And it's going to be a challenge, I think. And it's going to be something that, actually, it wouldn't put you in the 7th seed. It would probably keep you in the 8th seed because San Francisco and Arizona would switch. So you actually wouldn't make the playoffs there. So again, the way they put themselves in this position, you're gonna need some help, and that's what sucks, right? That is what sucks, that you basically don't control your own destiny now, right? And it's basically, I mean, look, technically, they haven't the division's not over, but it's over. Okay, like you getting swept by Atlanta. They have all the tiebreakers. They're 4-0 in the division. You're 1-2. I just don't see a way they're going to win this division now. I just don't see it. I don't see that as their likeliest path to the playoffs. I see it as being a wild card team. So that is tricky. The good news for the Buccaneers is if you look at their schedule remaining after the bye week, okay? So it's at the New York Giants, at Carolina Panthers, versus the Las Vegas Raiders, at the LA Chargers, at Dallas Cowboys, versus Carolina Panthers, and versus New Orleans Saints. The combined record of all of those teams after the bye week is 14-32 currently. So you're playing some not so good teams, and you're probably going to be getting Mike Evans back after the bye week. So I think that's where I'm not ready to say the season is over, even if they lose these next two games. Even if they drop to 4-6, I still don't know if this season is completely over. Now, are they going to go 7-0 after their bye week? Probably not. Like, I don't think they're going to win 7 games in a row. That's hard to do. But I think they could be good enough to compete for one of the wild card spots. So I don't think it's done yet. But again, like I said earlier, their margin for error now is much, much smaller.
Yeah, and I think when we start to dive into the pieces that they are working with on this roster, the conversation becomes that much greater. Like, how consistent can this team be? Breaking down some of the strength and weaknesses, some obvious weaknesses here on the defensive side of the ball, really been one of the top weaknesses for this Buccaneers team. I know when you dive into these losses over the last 4 games, turnovers are pretty telling, and we can talk about that in due time here. But as far as the defense goes, the Bucs are, bottom of the barrel. Like, they are among some of the NFL's worst. They are averaging they have given up 30-plus points in the last 3 out of 4 games. They are averaging 26.6 points per game given up, 28th in scoring defense, 387 yards per game given up, 30th in the NFL for yards allowed. And then they are averaging 255.4 pass yards per game, which is 29th for passing defense in the NFL. We've talked time and time again about it since the game, for Todd Bowles, it's a lack of adjustments. But on top of that, now that we're watching more of these games as well, there's communication issues. There's poor execution. There's poor tackling. There's guys in the wrong places. There's guys making the wrong moves on defense, opening up some huge holes for opposing offenses here, not playing in the spot that Todd Bowles put them in. So, Todd Bowles is an issue. Player execution is an issue. Communication is an issue with this defense. But now, Evan, the question is, do they even have the personnel to do what Todd Bowles wants to do with this defense? Down the stretch here, is this something they can fix? Because it's clear to both of us, I think, there's not going to be any moves made before the trade deadline. We've got just under a week. I don't think the Bucs are going to be doing much of anything. They did sign a defensive back to the team this week, so they got another corner.
To the practice squad, yeah.
I don't think they're going to get aggressive here as much as I would love for them to go after a pass rusher. I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they're going to target a linebacker. I don't think they're going to target any more pass catchers. Certainly don't think we need any more of those, especially the way they were moving the ball last week. But do they have the personnel to get it done on defense? What really needs to be the biggest change for them and the biggest adjustment, especially on the other side of the bye week here, as they look to hopefully make some changes, because they are just bleeding on the defensive side of the football here.
That's the frustrating thing, right? Is I don't think there is just do this and this and then it's good, right? I don't think it is an easy fix. It's a bad unit right now. It's a bad unit, and they lack the talent in critical areas. Okay, we talked about this before the season about the pass rush and the lack thereof, and how that did concern us. What if a guy like Yaya Diaby didn't find the same success that he found in his rookie season? That's happened. What if Joe Tryon-Shoyinka didn't sort of, this is a contract year for JTS, right? Maybe a lot of people are thinking, well, maybe, he'll not necessarily be a game changer, but maybe be a solid player in a contract year, That really hasn't happened. And then to top it all off, you start the season without Kalaji Kansi for a couple of weeks in the interior. You lose Vita Vea for a game in the interior. And then obviously, KJ Britt, he keeps developing. That really hasn't happened. Antoine Winfield Jr. has missed a couple games. Jordan Whitehead has been up and down. Antoine Winfield Jr. also hasn't been as good. Levante David hasn't been as good in coverage. Jamel Dean, who is now out, hasn't been as good in coverage. Zion McCollum is probably the biggest bright spot on this defense this season so far. And I mean, that's good. That's good for Zion McCollum. That's good for the Buccaneers. And I think they found a solid starting corner, but I think it's, people talk about Bowles, and I think it's both. I think it's, yes, I do think his scheme has issues, and the communication issues and the preparation issues. That's on the coach. That is on the head coach. However, I also just don't think he has the horses in critical areas in order to make it successful. And I mean, look, that's on Todd Bowles too, to develop those guys, right? To develop the Logan Halls and the JTS and Yaya Diabis and KJ Britts, but it's also on Jason Light too, to be able to find better players, right? Like they used the first round pick on JTS. They used the first pick of the second round on Logan Hall. Neither one of those picks has really worked out, right? I mean, KJ Britt, a fifth round linebacker, okay. But like a lot of their picks, they've invested a lot in the defensive line. And for as much as they've invested, it hasn't really panned out. So while it's on Bowles too, I also think it's on Jason Light. It's an organizational failure for the shortcomings of this defense right now. And I don't, like I said, I agree with you. There isn't going to be, if it's anything, it's a very, very minor move that's going to happen. I don't even expect that at the trade deadline. So I'm not expecting anybody to come in here and magically fix this. So it sucks. And I know people aren't going to like this answer, but you roll with what you got and just hope they play better, honestly.
Yeah, playing better is a huge part of it. And I think one of the most disappointing aspects of guys who need to play better are the veterans on this team. We kind of talked about it earlier this week, but Jordan Whitehead was an issue at times this week, whether he was making an adjustment that would compromise the look of the defense and Atlanta would take advantage of it, or he's just in the wrong spot. We've heard coaches talk to the media about how Jordan Whitehead is kind of struggling with this system, which is very odd. Because, again, I talked about this before on the Sunday show. He's played in this defense before. Like, he succeeded and played so well in this defense before that he got a fat contract from the New York Jets. The Bucs couldn't afford him. So they wait a little bit. They bring him back. And, like, I'm sure some things have changed.
Yeah.
And, again, maybe with the available personnel, I'm sure that Todd Bowles can't do as much as he would want to with a fully healthy defense. And they're kind of figuring that out week in and week out, right? You play with who you have. But I think the fundamental breakdown of like a guy who knows this defense, all of a sudden not knowing this defense at times and giving up, tough situations. Kayvon Merriweather, that Kyle Pitts touchdown, I think that was the only defensive snap of the day.
I think he was in for one snap. Yeah.
Yeah. And, again, that's just communication breakdown. That's guys who should know the defense and don't. And then again, guys who should play better. Man, I will never say a bad word about Levante David. There is no Levante David slander acceptable on this podcast. But I think we can say that, he just doesn't have the speed that he did even 2, 3, 4 years ago. The turn and burn ability, the sideline to sideline speed to get out in the flat where he needs to be and make that tackle. He can still make those plays. He's great at reading an offense. He knows where to be, when to be there. It's just there's certain things he can't do as well as he did.
That's okay. Like, I mean,
that's okay.
That's fine.
But it also shows you
nothing. But
it also exposes how much worse a player like KJ Britt is out there when he literally still can't keep up with an aging Levante David. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of issues here. Let me ask you this plain and simple before we talk about the offense. If the Buccaneers miss the playoffs down the stretch here, if the Bucs keep losing games, I'm going to be honest with you, my gut says it's going to be because of the defense. I think right now, statistically, the offense is in a little bit of a slump. The turnovers are an issue, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But statistically, they're one of the best in the league. They are efficient. They are scoring points. Todd Bowles said 26 points should have been enough to beat the Falcons. If you get a couple of stops from your defense, it could have been. But if the Bucs miss the playoffs this season, and it's because of the defense, does it cost Todd Bowles his job?
I think context matters. So they missed the playoffs at 8 and 9. No, I don't think it cost him his job. Now, I mean, going 8 and 9, that would probably mean the offense is doing pretty well, right? Or the defense has played a little bit better. The interesting thing to me is if he goes 7 and 10 and because they're 4 and 4 now. So that would be 3 and 6 down the stretch. To me, it would depend on timing. Timing would be pretty important for me. Because I think if there's less than 7 wins, I think he's fired. Okay, like I think if it's 6-11, that's 2-7 down the stretch. I think he's gone. But 7-10 is the interesting one where I think you're going to have a lot of interesting conversations, and I don't know if people are going to like this answer, but like I don't know if he's gone if they go 7-10. Like I really don't. I think the injuries would help the case. I think Chris Godwin's going down. His injury would hurt. Mike Evans obviously being out for a couple of games. Like I mentioned earlier, Antoine Winfield Jr. and Kalijah Kancey both missing a lot of games early in the season. And I just think the fact that I brought up earlier, I think Bowles' case would be, look, like if you get an offseason where we improve the pass rush, you get a better starting linebacker, you get another corner, like it can be better. And I'm not convinced he's gone if they go 7-10. If they miss the playoffs, I do think it's 50-50, and I think it matters how they miss the playoffs, right? If it, man, came up short, went 8-9 or 9-8 and just couldn't get one of those last spots, I think he stays. But if it's like they are crumbling down the stretch and it's like, man, you can't wait for this thing to be over, then I think he's probably gone. And the Glazers, the history shows that when that happens, like the Glazers typically will, they don't really they like a team to finish strong, right? Finish the regular season strong. And when that doesn't happen, I think there is consequences for it. I do think it's a little early to be talking about, Bowles' security, but it is fair to question because it's not like, oh man, Liam Cohen just hasn't really worked out. Baker hasn't played that well, and the offense can't score points. But the defense, that's Bowles' specialty. Of course, the defense is doing well. The defense is one of the reasons they're losing a lot of these games. Like you just brought up all those numbers. The defense has been bad. So what is Todd Bowles' purpose then? Like if he, as the head coach, you're supposed to have at least an average defense. And right now, his purpose, his calling card has simply not worked, and it's costing his team football games. So I'm not sure, to be honest with you. And I know it's a cop-out answer, but if he misses the playoffs, I would say it matters how they miss the playoffs on whether or not he would stay. If they do miss the playoffs, though, I would say he enters 2025. If they keep him, he enters 2025 like having to make the playoffs.
Yeah. No, I think it's the right answer for now. I think any concrete yes or no on the topic is probably emotionally charged, if we're being honest, because the argument's being made to keep this staff around. And I'd say that's kind of the thing, too, is when you keep Todd Bowles around, you keep Liam Cohen and this offensive staff around who have been efficient. They've been really good.
But what if Liam Cohen gets an offer for a head coach?
Exactly.
So that's been asked to me a couple of times, and I haven't heard much buzz about Liam Cohen as a head coach. Like you heard the things from Canales like last year, like right when the Bucs hired him. Oh, you can see why they loved him. He's a great talker. He's a leader of men. This and that. I'm not saying Cohen isn't those things. It's just in like the press conferences and stuff, you don't really hear that like talked about Cohen like that. So I'm not sure. Really quick though. What? Just in the chat. What? Okay. A good question would be, do you guys personally want Bowles back next year? And to answer that question, me personally, no, I do not. I was prepared. I'm not sure if I've said this or not. I might have. I might have made a couple of videos about this last year. If they had lost to Philly last year in the playoffs, I was prepared to fire him. So I personally wouldn't. But I mean, I don't think it's like if they keep him, I'm not going to say it's the most egregious move in the world. But personally, I would probably look elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer right now, but I'm going to lean towards no. And I think this kind of leans into the next thing I was going to bring up. I had actually asked you on this show a couple of weeks ago. The Bucs were at a good point as well, I think, when I asked you this question. I think it was after the Philly game or it was headed into that game. But I had asked you, have we seen the best version of the Bucs for this year? Have we seen the best of the Bucs in 2024? And when you look at their wins, when you look at how they were winning these ball games early in the season, I know that there was a lot to improve, but like the efficiency of that Eagles game, that had a lot of people talking about what this team could accomplish when everything was at its peak. But I think the best of Todd Bowles is still inconsistency. a 21-21 record as head coach, and I know he's got a couple of playoff wins, or a playoff win, excuse me. Couple of playoff appearances, couple of division titles, which is all fine and dandy. The context of those seasons matter as well. But just like you said, the context of the rest of this season and if the Bucs miss the postseason, how they miss the postseason, like that's important. Do you trust Todd Bowles to fix this defense down the stretch? Do you trust them to play consistently enough, or consistently well enough down the stretch to really salvage their season? Because that's what they have to do. Like I don't think 8 or 9 wins is going to guarantee you a postseason spot. I just don't think it's going to be good enough this year. I don't. I think with teams like Washington being where they are, we knew Detroit.
Every team in the NFC North has a winning record. Every single team. As we have a 20-hour super chat from Black Gold 1999. Appreciate it, Black Gold. What's the chances of us making a trade for a legit pass rusher or replacing KJ Britt with anybody? The trade thing, probably not likely. We talked about this a little bit earlier. The trade thing is probably not likely. However, the KJ Britt thing, I do wonder if they decide to give at some point a guy like JJ Russell or Antonio Greer Jr., Kalen DeLoach even. Like, I wonder if they decide to give somebody else a look, even if it's just for a couple snaps. I do wonder if they decide to give someone else a look at some point this season. So KJ Britt replacing him with anybody, it won't be probably from the outside, right? Anybody outside, but I do wonder if they try to look at somebody else.
Brutal as Bucks brings up a good point in chat here. He says, I could see the Bucks running it back one more year with Bowles. And that's where I find myself with Todd Bowles. Personally, do I want him back? No. I think we've seen the best of what Todd Bowles has to offer, which is one of the best offenses in the NFL if he can hire a good enough coordinator and an inconsistent defense that can occasionally lose you ball games. That's not a championship football team to me. It's just not. No. It's not going to be consistent enough at an NFL level to win you a championship. You might be lucky enough to get to the NFC title game, but if you face a good, healthy San Francisco team in the NFC title game, how's that going to look for you?
Your defense is going to get picked apart. I mean, they won a division 2 years in a row. They went 8-9 and then 9-8. Like they haven't won double-digit games with Todd Bowles. And it's probably looking like they probably won't win double-digit games this year. I mean, I would say 9-8 is probably, that would be 5-4. Maybe they get to 10, maybe. But like right now, it's looking like, maybe not. So it's, to me, just like I think somebody said, he's average. He's not. I don't think he's a bad coach.
No,
but he's average. And how much longer? And I don't. We can have, as the losses pile up, or if the losses pile up, we can have this conversation more and more as we get into late November, December, stuff like that. So I don't want to hammer it so much, but at some point, how much longer can you accept mediocrity?
Right.
And at some point, you have to say, like, enough is enough. Like, 8 wins ain't doing it for me anymore. Like it's not. 8 wins and sneaking in as a 7 seed to get trounced by the 2 seed isn't going to get it done.
Now, going back to Brutal's point here, he says, I could see the Bucs running it back one more year with Bowles. And this is where I find myself, because I think if the Bucs miss the postseason, and kind of like you had said, 7-10, 8-9, if you're floating around there and your defense plays well, they make the adjustments and the defense doesn't look like the shit we've seen the last 3 weeks, then I can see the Bucs deciding to give him one more year, because you keep this coaching staff around. Hopefully Liam Cohen doesn't get snatched up. He's going to be one of the hottest, potential OC head coach transition hires. But
maybe internally.
I think the arguments for keeping this staff together and trying to run it back one more year, keeping your guys healthy, is another thing too. Like, I think that's the argument for a lot of people,
They should have Chris Godwin right now, by the way.
They should. No, that's what I'm saying. Is like, when you look at that ball game against Atlanta, the way that it played out, as bad as the defense was, if they have either Mike Evans or Chris Godwin,
would have been nice to have that guy.
If they had either one, do they win that ball game? Does it change that game?
Oh, it definitely ups their chances. I mean, especially, in the 2-minute drill, they're running it with Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan, Raheem Jarrett. Raheem Jarrett caught, the chunk play on that drive. Raheem Jarrett caught it. Jarrett was his first game of the year. He had Ryan Miller out there catching balls. So, yeah, like I think it matters, and The Mike Evans one, I won't pin on him as much. That's just, I think that was a mistake by both the organization and Evans. I think they should have played it more safe. But also, he got injured. It was early in the game. Like, there was a reason for Mike Evans to be in that ball game. There was no reason for Chris Godwin to be. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. I don't want to keep rehashing that, but they should have Chris Godwin right now, and they don't. And I think Todd Bowles is partly to blame. But let's move on to the offense really quickly, because Baker Mayfield, right? And we've talked about it a lot. 7 interceptions in his last 3 games. The turnovers are starting to become an issue, as it is for this offense in general, right? Bucky Irving had the critical fumble late in Atlanta in week 5. If he doesn't fumble, probably puts that game away. And then Rachaad White starts off the Atlanta game on the second play of the game with a fumble. And then the Falcons end up scoring a touchdown pretty easily. So the turnovers themselves are becoming an issue on offense. But again, it's Baker Mayfield having to protect the football much better, especially without these weapons. He has to do a better job because they have no chance. If they're going to turn the ball over 2 or 3 times a game, they have no chance to win any of these games. I don't care who you're playing. I just don't see a way you're going to turn the ball over 2 or 3 times a game with the way this defense is playing. I expect to win many more games this year. So it's something that he's going to have to clean up and just play smarter, simpler football.
Yeah, chat brings it up. Baker Mayfield, 21 total touchdowns to 9 interceptions on the season. So he's playing efficient ball, right? Second in passing
it's
yards.
not bad. It's not bad. It's just the last 3 games have been, just the turnovers. That's the thing. It's not terrible when you look at just the numbers, right?
Right.
And he's been more good than bad.
Absolutely.
But this has been a trend that's starting to go in the wrong direction.
Well, and it's all about for him, just turning that trend around. Like we've talked about it over the course of 4 quarters, maintaining composure, taking care of the football, seeing receivers downfield. He just has to get back to doing it week in and week out. And he can. I think he can. I still trust that he can. I still trust that Baker Mayfield is the guy in Tampa Bay. But he's got to prove that he can stay consistent, stay consistently good. Because the frequency of these interceptions, now again, a couple of freak interceptions in the Saints game are going to factor into this, but the timing of them is just backbreaking. Like, there's no way around an interception. You put your defense in a tough spot, a terrible defense at that. You put your defense in a tough spot, they're not going to stop these teams from scoring, and you find yourself playing from behind in a lot of these games. And listen, turnovers go beyond Baker Mayfield at this point. Rachaad White fumbling on the opening drive of that game against Atlanta. It's going to hurt. You start the game down 7-0 when you finally get your offense back on the field. So what's the word I'm looking for? You take away chances for your offense to try and establish certain things, right? Couldn't get the run game going when you're trailing double digits. It's harder to do that. Like, you can commit to the run. I think they have the horses to do it, but I don't know. This is a throwing offense, and they like doing that. Baker Mayfield threw the football hell of a lot more in the second half than he did in the first half of that football game. Really quick, let's rattle off a couple of storylines here for the Buccaneers offense, and then we will wrap up this show. Headed into this week, we just now briefly talked about the running back situation for Tampa Bay. I think it's something they're going to have to continue to lean on. Rachaad White getting back into the lineup. He is healthy once again. The Bucs have made it clear that seems like their priority list is Rachaad White, Bucky Irving, and Sean Tucker down there at 3. But come on, dude, what's going on with Sean Tucker is my main question here. This is a guy that he was an NFC Offensive Player of the Week when the Bucs scored 51 points on the New Orleans Saints. He gets 7 snaps against the Atlanta Falcons. I had asked you after that game, is this not a thing because they don't want to make it a thing? And clearly that's the case. I mean, Todd Bowles also said this week that, quote, playing from behind early had a bit to do with his decision to not have Sean Tucker in the game. Maybe he's a liability in pass protection, which we talked about before. They're going to be throwing the ball more. They're playing from behind, so I understand that aspect of it. But, like, Rachaad White had the rough start that he did, fumbled on the first drive. And then Bucky Irving didn't practice all week. He ended up playing well, but you didn't know if he was going to play until Friday afternoon. So why is Sean Tucker not in this offense more? I can understand if the coaches are making a personal decision here. I just can't understand why.
I don't know if they like him that much. I mean, I think it's that simple. I don't know if they like him that much. Now, I mean, look, he wasn't good last year. Like, last year he didn't earn snaps. Okay, just simply he wasn't very good in the preseason last year either. He didn't earn snaps. This year, though, I mean, after that New Orleans game, I'm not saying he deserves to be the starter, but like it was only one game, but he deserves a little bit more of a look, right? And I think, especially with Bucky Irving, even though he played, he wasn't 100%. I mean, he didn't practice, right? So I mean, he definitely wasn't 100%. And I definitely think that there's a lot of opportunity there for him to get the football. Don't I think you're starting to see like I don't know if they like him that much, and I mean that's okay, but you'd like to give him more of an opportunity than you did, right? I mean, especially at the performance he had, in New Orleans. I think you'd like to give him a little bit more touches there and just see what you have. If he isn't productive, he isn't productive. All right, and then you can just go back to whatever, right? You can say, okay, yep, that was a one game sort of fluke, and all right, whatever. But yeah, Sean Tucker hasn't really been, and I'm not saying he won't be for the rest of the year. It's still a lot of games left. There's a lot of football left, but I do think it's something to where it's sort of that simple. That is, don't know if they envision him as being a big part of this offense.
I think they should. I think at this point, this is the first time since we've had this podcast, the Buccaneers have had 3 effective running backs. And I think I can say that with confidence with Sean Tucker. That game was obviously the outlier on his season. I don't think he's going to have 200
That was
plus.
the outlier for his career.
Right. I don't think he's going to do that again this year, but I think it certainly set a pace for what he is capable of, and what he is capable of is, 3-4 plus yards a carry. And sometimes that's all you need, especially when you talk about keeping guys fresh and managing injuries. But I hope that Todd Bowles is true to his word. He said that they were going to work Sean Tucker into this playbook. I certainly hope that is the case. One more storyline headed into this week's game, and just something to give some people hope. We'll dive a little bit more into it on the game preview show this Friday. That should be with James Hill, a.k.a. Mr. Bucs Nation, your boy. It was a big week for Cade Otton last week, and I think he is going to continue to play a huge part in settling Baker Mayfield down, allowing Baker to kind of, get comfortable finding his targets. But the Kansas City Chiefs are a team that has really struggled against the tight end position in 2024. They've got, really good team on both sides of the football here. But when we talk about where the Bucs could potentially exploit their defense, I think the tight end position could be just that. They have given up over 400 yards to tight ends over the last month. I mean, 400 yards. We're talking double-digit targets for these guys. 16 targets a game for the Raiders. 10 targets a game for the San Francisco 49ers. 13 targets a game for the Saints. 13 targets a game for the Chargers. And they are giving up a ridiculous amount of receiving yards. Some of these guys finding the end zone here. So could this be another blockbuster week for Cade Otton here? He did really well, crushed all of his props last week. So what do you think, Evan? Could he be maybe the X factor on the Bucs offense this week?
Well, a little interesting thing here is Cade Otton. I actually just found this tweet from PFF. Cade Otton among tight ends over the last 2 weeks. He is first in receptions with 17. He is second in receiving yards with 181. He is fourth with 75 yards after the catch. He is tied for second with 2 receiving touchdowns, tied for third with 9 first downs, and tied for first with 4 missed tackles forced. So, yeah, Cade Otton has been a pretty big part of this offense, especially lately. And I do think it's a pretty good time to be getting this matchup for Cade Otton as he's starting to heat up. And Kansas City's defense has been good this year, right? I mean, they're freaking 7-0. Like they're 7-0 for a reason. And Mahomes, somebody mentioned, Baker leads the NFL in picks or whatever. Mahomes, he's actually tied for the lead in picks because Mahomes is right there with him. Yeah. Kansas City's defense has been a big part of why they're 7-0, but a weakness has been the tight end spot for them. So I do think that's something the Bucs can exploit, but also the tough thing is without Mike Evans, without Chris Godwin, Kansas City this week in the film room is going to be finding a way to take care of Cade Otton. Like they're going to be finding a way to take him out of the football game. So the Bucs are going to have to find a way to get him the football in a little bit more creative way. So I'm curious to see how they do that. But yeah, definitely something to watch moving forward.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any other guys in that tight end room who could step up and kind of have a big week. I don't think they have anyone who's at that level, but it is going to be a big week for guys like Sterling Shepard. I know he was dealing with injury. We'll see what's going on with him this week, but Jalen McMillan going to have a lot of pressure. Raheem Jarrett back in the lineup, and I think he's got a lot of potential. We've seen him make some big plays, a couple of crucial catches for the Buccaneers in the loss last week. Although it was a loss, maybe two of the biggest catches of the day went to Raheem Jarrett. So an interesting week for the Buccaneers. We will dive more into those matchups and then some on this week's game preview. That should be sometime this weekend. But ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for today's midweek episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and watching live with us on YouTube. Cannon Fire crew hanging out in the chat here. Bry, Brutal as Bucks, What, Second Royalty, Crowman84, Adam Coate, Jacko Bluntly, Jersey Tooth PFP, and I cannot forget Black Gold 1999 for the 1999 Super Chat. Thank you very much, my friend, adding to the Wendy's fun. It's another night of Junior Bacon cheeseburgers for us here, Evan.
Oh yeah, the Wendy's fun. We are loading up tonight.
There we go. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show, and of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL, and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. What do you got for the people this week? It might be a little while till they hear from you.
Might be. But so we have on Bucs Nation, gonna have, I Bleav, the Q&A this week. And then the day after reactions post there. On the Cannon Fire Podcast YouTube channel, though, still do have content planned. It may look a little different, but still do have content planned. For just context, I will not be on the next couple of shows. But we still will have content for you guys. We're still going to have, I Bleav, betting the Bucs this week. We'll still have players to watch. So we'll still have all that stuff. It's not gonna go away completely. So enjoy James, I guess, as much as you can. But yeah, appreciate the support. I mean, you guys have been awesome with the content. I mean, literally, it's what keeps us going is you guys watching the stuff. So it's really cool to see. This is the first year we've done this sort of content before. This is the first year that we've rolled it out as consistently and as much as we have. So it's been really cool, and I appreciate all the support, and hope you guys are liking it. Betting the Bucs, I mean, we have to keep that going. We're 7-1 in our last 8. I mean, when you're hot, you're hot. You got to keep it going.
Yeah, I hope James texts me back, because we should be joined by James Hill. I won't put all that pressure on him, but I did text him a couple of days ago. I said, hey, I hit him with the dates. I was like, hey, here's the dates I'm probably going to need a co-host. Just let me know what you think. Whatever you can make. If not, I'll figure it out. And I think he may have blocked my number, because it's been like 3 days. I think he saw the list of shows, and then he blocked my number, and I haven't heard from him since, because I haven't heard a peep. So I hope he's okay.
I haven't heard from him either. I wonder how he's doing.
Hopefully we get him on this week.
Yeah, but like I said, I'll be back. Like I said, you'll see me sparingly, but stay tuned to the Campfire Podcast YouTube channel for all the content this coming week, leading up to the Kansas City game.
Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram, and Twitter at Retticus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. That's the show. We will talk to you later this week with a Week 9 game preview. The Buccaneers back on prime time for the second time in 3 weeks, taking on the back-to-back Super Bowl champions. Should be a doozy, folks. We'll break it down and then some this weekend. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. We will talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.